He built an empire on secrets. She carried the biggest one for 22 years. When their son walked into his father's office as an intern, neither man knew the truth. For 2 months, they worked side by side, a crime lord and the boy who had his eyes, until the day everything shattered. This is the story of a love that never died, a child hidden in plain sight, and the moment 3 lives collided in the most devastating way possible. Welcome to a story where blood runs deeper than betrayal, and some truths refuse to stay buried. Hello everyone, I'm back with another Afro-Korean story. Today I'll tell you a powerful story about secrets, blood, and the love that never dies. But before we begin, please subscribe and help us reach 1,000 subscribers. It would mean the world. Now, let's get to the story. The city never slept when Min Jun ruled it. From the 57th floor of the Obsidian Tower, he watched Manhattan spread beneath him like a kingdom made of glass and steel. His empire wasn't marked on any map. It lived in whispers, in the trembling hands of men who owed him money, in the silence that followed when he entered a room. He was 35 years old. He had built this in blood and calculated patience, and he was so very tired. "Mr. Kang?" His assistant's voice crackled through the intercom. "The new intern is here." Min Jun didn't look up from the contract he was reading. Another name. Another face. The company ran through eager young men like water through his fingers. "Send him in." The door opened. Min Jun's pen stopped moving. The young man who walked into his office had skin like warm earth after rain, dark and rich and alive. His hair was cut close, neat. His eyes, Min Jun's chest tightened. Those eyes were amber, light brown with flecks of gold, exactly like looking into a mirror 20 years ago. "Mr. Kang." The intern's voice was steady, confident. "American. I'm Elijah Morrison. Thank you for this opportunity." Min Jun forced his hand to stay relaxed around the pen. He was seeing things. He had to be. "Sit." Elijah sat. He wore a simple suit, but he wore it like armor. There was intelligence in his face, hunger in the way he leaned forward slightly, ambition that Min Jun recognized because he had built an empire on the same fire. "Your resume is impressive," Min Jun said, his voice cold and controlled. "Columbia, top of your class. Why work here?" "Because everyone says you're the most dangerous businessman in New York." Elijah smiled. It was small, careful. "I want to learn from the best." Something twisted in Min Jun's chest. He had heard those exact words before, in a different voice, a woman's voice, soft and fierce and unafraid. "I want to learn from you. Teach me your world." Min Jun pushed the memory down where it belonged, in the grave of things he couldn't afford to feel. "Danger isn't education," Min Jun said. "It's survival. Then teach me to survive." The silence between them felt heavy, like the air before a storm. Min Jun shouldn't have hired him. Every instinct screamed warning. But he looked at this young man and felt something crack in the ice around his heart. "You start tomorrow, 6 a.m. Elijah's smile widened. "I'll be here at 5:30. He left. Min Jun sat alone in his office as the sun set over Manhattan, turning the sky the color of old bruises. He poured himself whiskey, drank it, poured another. Those eyes. God, those eyes. 2 months passed like a dream Min Jun couldn't wake from. Elijah was brilliant, sharp. He learned the business faster than anyone Min Jun had ever trained. Supply chains, negotiations, the careful dance of legitimate commerce that hid the underground rivers of his real empire. They worked side by side. Late nights in the office, just the two of them, and the quiet hum of the city below. Min Jun told himself it meant nothing, that the warmth in his chest when Elijah laughed was just satisfaction at finding a competent employee, that the way he looked forward to their morning meetings was professional interest. Nothing more. "You're quiet today," Elijah said one evening. They were alone. The office dark except for the lamp on Min Jun's desk. "I'm always quiet." "No." Elijah leaned back in his chair, studying him. "You're silent. That's different. Silence is a choice. Minjun looked at him, really looked, the sharp intelligence. The careful way he moved through the world. The ambition tempered with something softer. Kindness that hadn't been beaten out of him yet. Your mother, Minjun said suddenly. You never mention her. Elijah's expression shifted. Something guarded slid behind his eyes. She raised me alone. Worked 3 jobs to put me through school. She's the strongest person I know. Her name? Why do you want to know? The question hung between them like smoke. Curiosity, Minjun lied. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then, Amara. Her name is Amara Morrison. The world stopped. Minjun's hand froze on his glass. The whiskey trembled, amber waves catching the light. Amara. God. God, no. Mr. Kang? Elijah's voice came from very far away. Are you all right? Minjun stood. Walked to the window. Put his hand against the cold glass because he needed something solid, something real. 23 years ago. A woman with skin like midnight and eyes that saw through all his careful walls. Amara. Who loved him when he was still building his empire. Who wasn't afraid of the blood on his hands. Who kissed him like he was worth saving. I'm pregnant. You can't be. We were careful. Careful isn't the same as safe. Get rid of it. The cruelest words he'd ever spoken. He saw her face shatter, watched her walk away. And he let her go because he told himself an empire couldn't be built on weakness. On love. On the kind of hope that made men vulnerable. He never saw her again. My mother was 22 when she had me, Elijah said quietly. She never told me who my father was. Just that he was Korean. That he had a kingdom to run. That he couldn't afford a family. Minjun closed his eyes. She never spoke badly about him, Elijah continued. Even though he broke her heart. She said some men are born for love, and some are born for power, and sometimes you fall in love with the wrong kind. Elijah? I'm not asking if you're him. Elijah's voice was steady, too steady. I stopped wondering about my father a long time ago. Whoever he was, he made his choice. Minjun turned around. Elijah stood there, 22 years old, brilliant and kind and strong. Everything Minjun could have been if he'd chosen differently, if he'd chosen love. You should go home, Minjun said. His voice sounded destroyed even to his own ears. It's only 8. Go. Home. Elijah stared at him, then nodded slowly, grabbed his jacket, walked to the door. He paused, looked back. My mother told me something once. She said the saddest men are the ones who build kingdoms but forget how to live in them. The door closed. Minjun stood alone in his empire of glass and shadows. He poured another drink, drank it, poured another. His son. His son had been sitting across from him for 2 months, learning his business, laughing at his dry jokes, asking about his life. And Minjun had looked at him and felt pride, felt warmth, felt something dangerously close to love. He walked to his desk, opened the locked drawer, pulled out a photograph he hadn't looked at in 20 years. Amara, young and radiant and laughing, her hand on her stomach. So early the pregnancy barely showed, before he told her to get rid of it, before he chose his empire over their child. Minjun touched her face in the photograph. Then he picked up his phone, made a call. His voice was empty when he spoke. I need a full background check. Elijah Morrison, 22. Mother's name Amara Morrison. I want DNA records, birth certificates, everything. He hung up. Outside, the city glittered, beautiful and merciless. Minjun sat in the dark and waited for confirmation of what he already knew. His son had come home, and Minjun had no idea how to tell him the truth. The file arrived at 3 a.m. Minjun hadn't slept. He stood at his window watching the city breathe, drinking whiskey that no longer burned, thinking about choices and consequences and the price of empires. His phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. DNA match, 97% paternity probability. Birth certificate confirms Elijah Morrison, born March 15th. Mother, Amara Morrison. Father, unknown. Minjun's hand tightened around the phone until he thought it might crack. Unknown. He had made her write that. Unknown. As if he were a ghost. As if their love had never existed. The file contained everything. Hospital records, school transcripts, photographs of Elijah growing up, birthday parties where Amara smiled even though she looked exhausted, graduations where his son stood proud and alone because the other children had fathers in the audience. Minjun scrolled through 22 years of missed moments. First day of school, first basketball game, prom, college acceptance letters. A life he had no part of. A son who grew up brilliant and kind despite having a father who chose an empire over him. His phone rang. He answered without checking the caller ID. Boss. It was Jin, his head of security. We have a situation. Minjun's entire body went cold. What situation? Someone leaked photos to the press. Of you and the intern. Working late. They're calling it favoritism. But that's not the problem. What's the problem? One of the photos shows him clearly, and someone ran facial recognition. Found old photos of you from 20 years ago. Minjun stopped breathing. Boss, the internet is already making connections. They're saying he looks like you. They're digging into his background. It's only a matter of time before... Minjun hung up. He called Elijah. It rang. And rang. And rang. Please leave a message. Elijah, it's Minjun. Don't go online. Don't read anything. Just call me, please. He sounded desperate. He didn't care. Minjun grabbed his jacket. His keys. He was halfway to the elevator when his phone buzzed again. A text. From Elijah. I saw the photos. I saw what people are saying. We need to talk. I'm at the office. Minjun's heart stopped. He took the private elevator down. 57 floors in silence. His reflection in the polished steel looked like a stranger. A man who had everything and nothing. A king of a kingdom built on ghosts. The office was dark except for one light. Elijah sat at the conference table. His laptop open in front of him. His face unreadable. On the screen, side-by-side photographs. Minjun at 22, Elijah at 22. The resemblance was undeniable. The same eyes. The same sharp jaw. The same expression of controlled intensity. How long have you known? Elijah's voice was quiet. Dangerously quiet. 2 months ago. The day you walked into my office. You knew. For 2 months. And you said nothing. I needed to be sure. You needed to be sure? Elijah stood. His hands were shaking. I have your eyes. Your face. Your everything. What more proof did you need? Minjun took a step forward. Elijah, is that even my name? Or did my mother make it up because my real father couldn't be bothered to give me one? The words hit like bullets. Your mother loved you, Minjun said. Everything she did was to protect you. From you? Silence. Elijah laughed. It was a broken sound. Oh God. She was protecting me from you. I told her to get rid of the pregnancy. The confession came out like blood from a wound. When she told me she was pregnant, I told her I couldn't have a family, that I was building something and a child would make me weak. I gave her money and told her to handle it. And she kept me anyway. She kept you because she's stronger than I ever was. Elijah stared at him. His eyes were wet, furious. You built your empire. You got what you wanted. I didn't want this. Minjun's voice cracked. I didn't want to be standing here 22 years later looking at my son and seeing everything I could have had, everything I threw away. Then why hire me? Why let me work beside you? Why look at me every day and say nothing? Because I'm a coward. Minjun's hands were shaking now too. Because I thought I could have this. Just this. A few months of knowing my son without him hating me, without him knowing what I did. Well, Elijah closed his laptop. His voice was empty. Now I know. He walked toward the door. Elijah, please. Don't. Elijah stopped. Didn't turn around. Don't call me that. Don't call me anything. You lost the right to my name 22 years ago. I can't lose you again. You never had me to lose. The door closed. Min-jun stood alone in his kingdom of glass and regret. The city spread beneath him. Millions of lives, millions of lights. And he would have traded all of it, every building, every dollar, every drop of power, for the chance to go back 23 years and say different words. Keep the baby. Keep our child. I'll figure it out. But time only moved forward, and some choices couldn't be unmade. Min-jun pulled out his phone, looked at his contacts, found the one number he swore he'd never call. Amara Morrison. His finger hovered over it. Outside, the sun began to rise over Manhattan. The city turned gold and forgiving for just a moment before the day began. Min-jun pressed call. It rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a voice he hadn't heard in 23 years. Older now, but still her. Hello? Amara. His voice broke on her name. It's Min-jun. Our son knows. And I think I just lost him. Silence on the other end. Then, you lost him 23 years ago. Now you get to decide if you want to find him again. The line went dead. Min-jun stood in his empty empire as the sun rose. And for the first time in 23 years, the crime lord of New York began to cry. Amara Morrison arrived in New York on a Tuesday. Min-jun watched from his office window as the black car pulled up to the Obsidian Tower. She stepped out into the morning light, and time collapsed. 23 years vanished like smoke. She was 45 now. Her hair was natural, worn in elegant locks that framed her face. She moved with the same grace he remembered, but there was something new in her bearing, a strength that came from surviving what should have broken her. She was more beautiful than his memory had allowed. His assistant buzzed. "Ms. Morrison is here, sir." "Send her up." Min-jun's hands were shaking. He, who had stared down armed men without flinching, was terrified of facing the woman he had loved and destroyed. The elevator chimed. The doors opened. Amara walked into his office like she owned it. Her eyes found his immediately, those same dark, knowing eyes that had seen through every wall he'd built around his heart. "Amara." "Min-jun." Her voice was steady, controlled. "You look exactly the same, except for the eyes. Your eyes look tired. 23 years will do that." "No." She set her purse down on his desk, looked at him directly. 23 years of living with what you did will do that." The words hit like a physical blow. "I deserve that. You deserve much worse." She walked to the window, looked out at the city he'd conquered. "But I didn't come here for revenge. I came because my son called me crying at 4 a.m. Because he's hurting. And when Elijah hurts, I hurt." Min-jun moved closer. Not too close. He didn't have the right. "How is he?" "Devastated, angry, confused." Amara turned to face him. "He spent his whole life wondering about you. I told him stories, carefully edited ones. I said his father was brilliant and ambitious, that he had important work, that he loved us, but couldn't stay. You lied for me. I lied for Elijah." Her voice hardened. "So he wouldn't grow up thinking he was unwanted. So he wouldn't spend his childhood believing he was a mistake. He wasn't a mistake. Then what was he?" Amara stepped forward. Her eyes blazed. "What do you call a child whose father offered money to make him disappear? What do you call a baby whose existence was inconvenient to a man building his empire?" Min-jun had no answer. There was no answer that didn't make him a monster. "I loved you," Amara said quietly. "God help me. I loved you so much it nearly killed me when you told me to get rid of our baby. I stood in that clinic. I filled out the paperwork. I sat in the waiting room." Min-jun's chest constricted. "And then I felt him move. Just a flutter. So small I almost missed it." Tears slid down her cheeks. "And I thought about you. About how brilliant you were. How you looked at the world like it was a puzzle you could solve. How you kissed me like I was the only real thing in your life of shadows. She wiped her eyes roughly. I walked out of that clinic. I packed everything I owned. I moved to Philadelphia where you couldn't find me. And I raised our son alone. 3 jobs. Night school. I gave him everything I had. You gave him more than I ever could have. I gave him love, Minjun. The thing you were too afraid to give. The truth of it settled between them like broken glass. Minjun walked to his desk, opened the locked drawer, pulled out the photograph he'd kept for 23 years. Amara, young and pregnant and radiant. I've looked at this every day, he said. Every single day for 23 years. And every time I asked myself what kind of man I would have been if I'd chosen differently. Amara took the photograph, stared at her younger self. A better one, she said simply. I can't change the past. But I want... His voice broke. I want to know my son. I want the chance to be his father. Even if he hates me. Even if it takes the rest of my life. Amara studied him for a long moment. Then she handed back the photograph. Elijah is brilliant. Like you. But he's also kind. Compassionate. He believes in second chances. She picked up her purse. The question is, are you willing to earn one? Yes. It won't be easy. He's angry. He has every right to be. I know. And I'm not doing this for you. Amara's voice was steel. I'm doing it because Elijah deserves to know where he comes from. He deserves the truth. All of it. All of it? She smiled. It was sad and knowing. He needs to know about your empire. Your real empire. The blood you've spilled. The lives you've destroyed. He needs to see who his father really is before he decides if he wants you in his life. Minjun felt cold. That will make him hate me more. Maybe. Or maybe it will help him understand that you weren't just cruel. You were terrified. And fear makes cowards of us all. She walked to the elevator. Pressed the button. I'm staying at the plaza. Elijah doesn't know I'm here yet. You have 24 hours to figure out what you want to say to him. Amara. She looked back. Thank you. For raising him. For making him into someone worth knowing. Her expression softened slightly. He was always worth knowing, Minjun. You just weren't ready to see it. The elevator doors closed. Minjun stood alone. Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. People living and dying and making choices that would haunt them forever. He looked at the photograph again, at Amara's smile, at the hope in her eyes before he destroyed it. Then he picked up his phone and typed a message to Elijah. I know you don't want to see me. I know I have no right to ask. But there are things you need to know. About me. About what I've done. About why I was too afraid to be your father. Meet me tomorrow. 8 p.m., the penthouse. Come alone, and I'll tell you everything. He sent it before he could reconsider. 3 minutes later, his phone buzzed. I'll be there. But not for you. For the truth. Minjun sat down, poured whiskey he wouldn't drink, and began to prepare for the hardest conversation of his life. Outside, the sun set over Manhattan. The city turned to gold and shadow. Somewhere in that vastness, his son was alive, breathing, deciding whether a man like Minjun deserved redemption. And for the first time in 23 years, Minjun prayed to a god he'd stopped believing in. Please, just give me this one chance. I won't waste it. The city didn't answer. But tomorrow would come anyway. And Minjun would finally tell his son the truth about the kingdom he'd built, and everything he'd sacrificed to build it. The penthouse was quiet when Elijah arrived. Minjun stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker like dying stars. He'd sent his security away. No guards, no protection. Just a father and son and 23 years of silence between them. The private elevator chimed. Elijah stepped out. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes. His usual careful composure cracked at the edges. But he stood tall, proud. He had Amara's strength. You came, Minjun said. I almost didn't. Elijah's voice was rough. I sat in the lobby for 20 minutes trying to decide if I wanted answers badly enough to face you again. And I deserve the truth, even if it destroys me. Minjun gestured to the couch. Elijah sat. Minjun remained standing. Some confessions required distance. What do you know about my business? Minjun asked. You run Obsidian Holdings, real estate, investments, import-export, legitimate enterprises worth billions. Elijah's eyes narrowed. But that's not what you really do, is it? No. The word hung in the air like smoke. Minjun walked to the bar, poured 2 glasses of whiskey, handed one to Elijah. Their fingers didn't touch. I control the largest Korean criminal organization in North America, Minjun said. We move money, information, occasionally people who need to disappear. We don't deal drugs. We don't traffic humans. But we're not innocent. Men have died because I ordered it. Families have been destroyed because they stood in my way. Elijah's hand tightened around his glass. You're a crime lord. Yes. And you hired me, your son, as an intern in your empire. I didn't know you were my son when I hired you. But yes. Elijah stood abruptly, started pacing. This is insane. I've been working for the mafia for 2 months. I've been sitting in meetings about supply chains that move guns and counterfeit goods through 7 countries, and signing NDAs that would get you killed if you violated them, and learning from you. Elijah's voice cracked. From a man who kills people. Yes. Elijah turned to face him. His eyes were wet, furious. Who are you? A man who made a choice 23 years ago. Minjun set down his glass. I was 22 when I took over this organization from my father. He died violently, betrayed by someone he trusted. I watched him bleed out in our kitchen while my mother screamed. Elijah went still. I was a kid, terrified, alone. And suddenly I had an empire built on blood and loyalty and violence. I could have walked away, disappeared, lived a normal life. Minjun's voice went hollow. But I was angry, and grief makes you cruel. So I stayed. I learned. I became harder than my father ever was. I built something that couldn't be destroyed because I destroyed everything that made me weak first. Including love. Including love. Minjun looked at him directly. When I met your mother, I was 29. I'd been running this organization for 7 years. I was good at it. Successful. But I was empty. And then Amara walked into a charity gala I was using as a front, and she looked at me like I was human. Elijah's expression shifted. Something softer moved behind his anger. She didn't know what I was, just that I was intense and driven and lonely. We fell in love fast, reckless. She was 22, full of hope and dreams, and this beautiful belief that people could change, that love could save even the most broken men. But you didn't change. I tried. Minjun's voice broke. For 6 months, I tried. I pulled back from certain operations. I delegated. I imagined what it would be like to have a life outside this empire. To wake up next to her every morning. To be normal. What happened? Rival organization. Korean syndicate from Los Angeles. They found out about Amara. Saw her as weakness. As leverage. Minjun closed his eyes. They sent me photographs. Her leaving work. Getting coffee. Walking alone at night. They didn't have to say the threat out loud. I understood. Elijah sank back onto the couch. I had a choice. I could protect her by leaving this life. Or I could protect her by keeping her away from it. From me. Minjun opened his eyes. They were devastated. When she told me she was pregnant, I panicked. A child would be even more vulnerable. Even more precious. Even more dangerous. So you told her to get rid of it. I told her I couldn't be a father, that this life didn't allow for families, that she needed to choose, me or the baby. His voice went rough. She chose you, and I'm grateful, because you're alive, because she gave you everything I couldn't. Elijah was quiet for a long moment. Then, did you love her? Yes. Do you still? Minjun looked out at the city. at the empire he'd built on sacrifice and fear. I never stopped. I just got very good at pretending I had. Silence settled between them. Not comfortable, but not hostile. Something more complex. More human. "Why did you really hire me?" Elijah asked softly. "Because when you walked into my office, I looked at you and saw everything I could have been. Everything I should have been. You had my intelligence but Amara's heart. My ambition but her kindness. You were proof that I could have been better. That I chose wrong." Minjun turned to face his son. "And selfishly, I wanted 2 months. Just 2 months of knowing you. Of being near you. Of pretending I was the kind of man who could be your father. You are my father. Biologically. But fathers show up. Fathers sacrifice. Fathers choose their children over their empires." Minjun's voice was raw. "I'm just a man who made a cowardly choice 23 years ago and has been trying to justify it ever since." Elijah stood, walked to the window, stood beside Minjun. They looked at the city together, father and son, seeing the same view from different angles. "My mother told me once that the saddest men are the ones who build kingdoms but forget how to live in them," Elijah said. "She's right. She also told me that everyone deserves a second chance, but they have to earn it." Minjun looked at his son, really looked, at the intelligence and strength and capacity for forgiveness that he'd inherited from Amara, at the reflection of himself tempered with compassion. "What do I have to do? Be honest, always. No more secrets, no more lies. If I'm going to know you, really know you, I need to see all of it. The empire, the blood, the choices that made you who you are." Elijah's voice was steady. "And then I'll decide if who you are is someone I can have in my life. That's fair. And you have to apologize to my mother. Really apologize. Not for leaving her, but for making her feel like loving you was a mistake. It wasn't a mistake. Then tell her that." Minjun nodded. His throat was tight. "Anything else?" Elijah smiled. It was small, careful, but real. "Teach me, like you promised. Teach me your world. Let me understand what kind of man builds an empire on fear. And maybe I'll understand why you were too afraid to be my father. You want to learn this business? I want to know who you are. All of you. The crime lord and the broken boy who watched his father die. The man who loved my mother and the coward who let her go." Elijah's eyes were fierce. "If I'm going to be your son, I need to know what that means." Minjun felt something shift in his chest. Something that had been frozen for 23 years beginning to thaw. "Okay," he said. "I'll show you everything. And when you've seen it all, when you know exactly what kind of man I am, you can decide if I'm worth knowing. Deal." They stood together in silence. The city spread beneath them. Millions of lights. Millions of lives. Millions of chances to choose differently. "Can I ask you something?" Minjun said quietly. "Yes. Do you think you could ever forgive me?" Elijah was quiet for a long time. Then, "I don't know yet, but I'm willing to try." It wasn't absolution, but it was possibility. And for a man who'd spent 23 years in darkness, possibility felt like dawn. 3 months later, everything had changed. Elijah came to the office every day, not as an intern now, as Minjun's son, his protege, his heir, though neither of them said the word out loud yet. They worked side by side. Minjun showed him everything, the legitimate businesses and the shadow empire beneath, the careful accounting that hid money flows, the networks of loyalty bought with fear and respect, the precise calculations that kept violence off the streets, but profits in the accounts. Elijah learned fast, too fast. Sometimes Minjun looked at him and felt pride so fierce it terrified him. Other times, he looked at him and felt crushing guilt that he was teaching his son the same darkness that had consumed his own life. But Elijah had asked for truth, so Minjun gave it to him. They also had dinner together, every Tuesday and Thursday. Just the two of them. Sometimes they talked business. Sometimes they talked about nothing. Movies, books, the way the city looked different in winter. Sometimes they sat in silence and it didn't feel empty. It felt like the beginning of something. Amara came to New York twice. She had coffee with Minjun. Stiff, careful conversations where they navigated the wreckage of their past. He apologized properly. Told her that loving her wasn't a mistake, that pushing her away was, that she'd given their son everything that mattered. She didn't forgive him, but she stopped looking at him like he was a monster. Progress came in small, painful increments. One evening, Minjun and Elijah stood on the penthouse balcony. The city glittered below, beautiful and merciless as always. "I've been thinking," Elijah said, "about your empire, what you built, why you built it." He leaned against the railing. "You did it because you were afraid, because your father died and you thought power was the only thing that could protect you." Minjun was quiet, listening. "But power didn't protect you. It just made you lonelier. You built this huge kingdom and filled it with everything except the things that actually matter. Love, family, connection. I know. So what if—" Elijah turned to face him. His eyes were bright with an idea. "What if we changed it, not abandoned it? You can't just walk away from something like this. But what if we made it different? Cleaner, more legitimate, less violent?" Minjun felt something stir in his chest. Hope, maybe. The dangerous kind. "You want to reform a criminal empire? I want to give you a second chance to build something worth having." Elijah's voice was passionate now. "You're brilliant, Dad. You built all this with nothing but ambition and fear. Imagine what you could build with purpose, with someone beside you who actually believes you can be better. Dad." The word hit Minjun like a bullet to the chest. Elijah had never called him that before. Father, sometimes. Minjun, often. But never Dad. "Say that again," Minjun said quietly. "What?" "What you called me." Elijah smiled, soft and real. "Dad. I called you Dad. Because that's what you're trying to be. And I think maybe you're getting good at it." Minjun's vision blurred. He, who hadn't cried in 20 years except for that one morning after Elijah learned the truth, felt tears slide down his face. "I don't deserve you." "No, you don't." Elijah stepped closer, put his hand on Minjun's shoulder. "But you're trying. And trying is how we become the people we're supposed to be." Minjun pulled his son into a hug. Elijah stiffened for just a moment, then relaxed, hugged him back. They stood there on the balcony with the city spread beneath them, and Minjun felt something he hadn't felt in decades. Peace. "Okay," he said when they finally pulled apart. "Let's do it. Let's change this empire. Make it into something that doesn't require darkness to survive. It won't be easy. Nothing worth doing ever is." They smiled at each other. Father and son, crime lord and idealist. Two men learning how to build something together. Over the next 6 months, they worked. Carefully. Quietly. They shifted assets, closed certain operations, invested in legitimate businesses. Minjun used his influence to push other organizations toward less violent methods. It was slow, dangerous. People within his own organization resisted. But Elijah was there, brilliant and determined and unafraid. Amara visited more often. She and Minjun found a careful friendship. Not romance, that was gone, buried in the past where it belonged, but respect, understanding, the acknowledgement that they'd both done their best with impossible circumstances. One evening, the three of them had dinner together. Minjun's penthouse. Amara cooked, something she'd loved doing when they were young. Elijah told stories about Colombia. They laughed, and Minjun looked around his table and realized he'd finally built something worth having. Not an empire of fear, but a family. Small, imperfect, hard-won, real. "What are you thinking about?" Elijah asked. "That I spent 23 years building the wrong kingdom." Amara smiled. Better late than never. Is it better? Yes, Elijah said firmly. It's better, because you're here now, because you chose to change, because you looked at your empire and decided your son was more important. Minjun reached across the table, took Elijah's hand, then carefully took Amara's. Thank you, he said. His voice was rough with emotion. Thank you for not giving up on me. Either of you. We didn't do it for you, Amara said gently. We did it for us. For the family we deserve to be. Are we? A family? Elijah squeezed his hand. We're getting there. One day at a time. Outside, the city glittered. The same city where Minjun had built his empire of shadows. But tonight, it looked different. Softer. More forgiving. Or maybe he was just finally learning to see it through different eyes. They finished dinner, talked late into the night. When Amara and Elijah finally left, Minjun stood on his balcony alone. But the loneliness felt different now. Not crushing. Just quiet. His phone buzzed. A text from Elijah. Thanks for dinner, Dad. Love you. See you tomorrow. 3 words. Simple. Powerful. The 3 words Minjun had waited 23 years to hear. Love you. He typed back with shaking hands. Love you too, son. Sleep well. Minjun looked out at his kingdom. The empire he'd built. The city he'd conquered. All of it felt smaller now. Less important. Because he'd finally learned the truth his father never taught him. The truth Amara had known all along. The truth Elijah had shown him through forgiveness and patience. The only empire worth building is the one you can share with the people you love. Everything else is just noise. Minjun smiled. Went inside. For the first time in 23 years, he slept without nightmares. And when he woke the next morning, his son was already in the office waiting for him, ready to build something new together. A kingdom built on hope instead of fear, on love instead of loneliness, on second chances, and the beautiful, terrifying possibility that broken men can heal if someone believes in them enough. Minjun walked into his office. Elijah looked up and smiled. Ready to change the world, Dad? Minjun smiled back. With you? Always. And together, they began.